All right, welcome back. Resolve 21 just popped out, this beta release. I want to show you a few things I found pretty useful. First up, I want to show you CineFocus. You can use this on the edit page or on the color page. Just going to pop it on this node here, and we'll zoom in to take a look at what it's doing. Your icon changes, and you can kind of click where you want focus. So you can see the huge drastic change from when I click on the actor in the background versus the foreground, or even here. So you can kind of split the difference. It works with the depth map and stuff like that. So let's work over some of these tools. For the depth map portion, this is going to work just like the regular depth map, and we have to drop down the menu here. Basically, when you click on one of these focused menus, it'll deactivate what you're not going to use. So right now we're on depth map. Same thing we can use in alpha input or internal, and there's faster and better. You can invert it. And of course, you can adjust the layers for fine tuning your far and your near limits. So that all works. There's post processing and a few different things. Now, if we go to focus mode, kind of get like a highlight view. Anything that's actually more clear without the halo is what's going to be in focus. So if I click on the actor here, you can see this is more defocused or highlighted, and the rest has this sort of haze. And then if we go back to result, that's sort of what we're getting. More focus here and hazing around here. Now we do have a few different parameters, so we can change the focus distance, and that's letting us see visually what's going on. And we can also drag it, and it kind of works in real time here. We also have a track focus to point. You'll recognize this little icon from the relight. So this one actually works pretty smoothly if you want to fine tune what the little parameter you're looking at. And then we have a no foreground blur. So if we go back to result, you can see she's in focus, but we got some blurring, of course, in the background and here in the foreground. If I click on no foreground blur, you can see how his face gets a little clearer, his shoulder, because he's closer. If we look on the depth map, anything that's pure white is what's considered closest to the camera, and the gray or the darker areas are further away. So if we go back to result and click off our preview here, we can change focus. So we can change our distance. Now the cool thing is this actually gives us a little preview with the depth of field. If we click on aperture here, we're looking at where our tight focal point is and sort of our foreground and our background. So if I click on no foreground blur here, you can see the foreground becomes tight and focused all the way to the midpoint, and then it starts the defocus. And if we go back to result, you can see that's exactly what we're getting here. And then with aperture, you can just change that here. If I go back to no foreground blur, you can change how tight and far away. And then you have lens properties with some chromatic aberration that actually gives you a little color values here. And then we have aperture with the shape of the bokeh. So if you want to change all that, you can. And there's more to it as far as anamorphic lens distortion and things like that. If we go to result, we get access to all these parameters. So if I wanted to change the curvature of the lens, we could do that. So these could be pretty handy for some effects and some other things depending on what you're working with. So once again, a lot of parameters here. And if we want to just choose a part and not make it quite as pronounced, we can roll down our aperture size here and get something a little more subtle, but it adds a very cinematic quality. So that is the CineFocus. I will now move on to another tool here. So I'll reset this grade. Speaking of grades, another tool that we have here is like a multi-pass delivery. So under our color menu here down at the bottom, we now have Multimaster Trim Manager. That pops up this little dialog box, and this allows you to make basically custom trim passes that you could give different deliveries on. So the first one here, Untitled 709. If you want to make a new one, you just hit add, and it just labels it sequentially as trim. So I'm going to remove that one. I rename that to 709. As soon as you check use custom settings, you can change your monitor output. You can change the actual output resolution, and then you can add a LUT, a color space change. And there's a drop down menu or a menu like this. And then you hit save. Now there's a 3-dot menu here that says enable the trim on and gives you the after clip, before group, after group, before timeline, and after. So you can get pretty specific. So there's 709 and a 2020. So I have two different sort of delivery parameters. So you can see the output color space is now Rec.2020, and on 709 it's 709. So now we hit save. And up here where our node tree is, you can see you got a little red indicator here. It says we're on the trim Rec.709, and then you can change what mode you're on. So if I wanted to just change the before timeline trim, I can go here, just give it a different kind of look. There we go. So now that's more of a blue look. Now to get into your other trims, use this 3-dot menu here, and you have a select trim pass drop down. So if I go none, this is back to just our regular timeline clips, although we do see this preview right here. And then if I go back to, say, the 2020, and we're on the timeline for that, maybe give that a red look. So now, depending on what we're on, we can choose the clip. So I'll go back to 709. And then when you go back to your delivery page, we now have this trim pass drop down. So you got to be cognizant of that as well. So that's how you can do multiple different color passes. You can do it with groups too, of course, but this works pretty well. And now if we want to render this, we now have a background render. So two different things that are cool. Down here in the bottom left, we have an estimated file size. So if you were to switch out your codecs, you can see this one says 125 gigs. If we were to go with the QuickTime, we go with MP4, it's a full terabyte. And of course, if we go with QuickTime and H.264, it's about 18 gigs. So I'm going to add that to the render queue. You can see it pop up here. And now if we go to our preferences, we now have this category called background tasks. We have enable background renders and pause background renders on foreground activity. So I have those enabled. So if I go here and I say render, it's going to do a little prep work, and then I notice that is a little bit slower than it used to be, but then it'll start rendering here and give us a little progress meter. But here's where the cool part comes in. So now it's rendering, says we got about 11 minutes. I can actually switch back over to my edit page or, color page, whatever we need, and still process. Now we have a new drop-down box here in the bottom right called background tasks, and we can see there's a render. Now, if I go back to my color page and hit play and open the background tasks, you can see the job has stopped at 2%. So if I stop and go back to our background render, it's going to kick off again, and now it's in progress, and you can also kill it from here, which is pretty cool. So that is a couple nice features there. Another thing we just got was AI speech to voice. So let me find where I did that here on this pass. So I did it on track 2 here. It's right here. And how we do that is we go to timeline, AI tools, and we choose speech generator. So I just typed in, I made a mistake. You have a male 1 and 2 and female 1 and 2, or you can use custom voice. I used custom voice and added a voiceover from a previous tutorial here. I think you can go as little as 10 seconds or 15. And then you have options for variations, generate an ID number, and then you can name the track something besides default name. You could add it to timeline, and it asks you, do you want to go to a new track or one of your pre-existing? Then you hit generate. So now you can see I have 2 tracks here. And if we right click and reveal in Finder, we can see we now have a speech generator folder made for this project, variation 1 and variation 2. I made a mistake. I made a mistake. So that's not me. That was generated through the speech generator. And of course, it'll generate wherever you're at in your bins. So if you're in the master bin, it'll go here. I happen to be sitting in the feature bin. So these 2 files generated here. So that's a cool new feature. Another new feature that is pretty awesome is spell check. So if I grab a text box here and we go here, click on it, I'm going to misspell a word here. We get a little squiggly here in the text box. It's kind of hard to see, but we also have it here in our preview window. And that's because on our overlay here, it's on Fusion overlay. So as long as that's up, maybe if you're doing a spell check on all your texts, that will show you right up here. Now to use their suggestions, you just right click the word. It says, did you mean, and gives you a few options. You can also tell it to ignore. So if I ignore this misspelling, it now no longer shows an incorrect. But if we wanted to edit, we can right click again, and now this menu pops up and we can get to our managed ignore words menu. So now you could see where I added the extra L version is in here, and I could always delete it by going like that and hit save. So now if I type it as it was, it'll flag it again. Another thing that is cool is when you were previewing fonts before, you would have to just drag and kind of visually see on screen. Well, now we have this little font preview box. I'm going to click it and it opens this extra window. If I click on all fonts, it kind of uses this quick brown fox dialog. You can change that actually, but shows you the different versions of fonts. And if you like one, you can hit the little star and you can click on your favorites, and then you could deselect it here if you want. And you could change the view options a little bit here. So if you wanted to add that, just double click it and hit select. And now we have that kind of font. So it's a nice, easy way to preview. You can also create folders for your audio tracks now. So let's say we were getting too much real estate getting used up and we wanted to collapse some folders. Let's say we took these 3 tracks. I can right click and say add tracks to new folder now, and then collapse that down if we wanted. And this also changes the view over here on your mixer where these folders are in here, but they're not visible unless we drop them down, and then that expands. So it kind of gives you a nice little real estate. And you can actually move these out of the folder. It's kind of a little clunky, but you can grab them here and move them. And now I've moved them out of the folder, and then you can go to your index here under tracks and go to your folder and just say delete track. And now we're back to sort of square one, although we're out of order now, but you get the gist. So I'll move track 1, 2, and 3 here back above the buses, and now we're back to normal. So kind of a cool feature that they added there. You can also search with Intelli Search. If we go to features here, I actually did a Intelli examination here on this Cobra clip. You can see we have these little icons here. It's got the translation and the new AI translation, which is down here. So you can tell it to analyze right here, and it'll say Intelli Search for faces, color markers, speaker detection, and audio classification. It does take quite a while. So I already did that on Cobra. So now if we click on that box and have our search tab here, we can change visual search, transcript, or all. And we can do full clips, segments, selected bins. So since this bin only has one feature, that's all it's going to give us the results for. So if I click on the search box here, this is pretty cool if you're trying to search for something in particular in your shoot. So I'm going to choose clock here. And if I click on this, here's a clock. If I click on the next one, we got a clock. Click on this, we got a watch. Click on that, we have a speedometer, but it's interpreting it as a sort of a dial on these last couple. This sort of looks like a clock face, so obviously it's not perfect, but works pretty good. So here's these segments, and I could actually make it into a smart bin if we wanted to now. You can make the new smart bin here with those selected clips. So if we did the search again, that would work with this little plus. So those are some of the features I thought were pretty cool in 21. There's a whole bunch more, but kind of a brief overview. All right, consider subscribing or leave me a like if you found that helpful. I always appreciate the feedback, and I'll see you guys in the next one.